Okay, I'm gonna start the audio. Do you want to make a loud noise so we can sync the audio potentially if we need?
Like a
Just
tick, 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 tick.
do you want to clap? There you go. Okay. All right. Good stuff. Okay, I'll just leave it on that. Yeah.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Good
Nice to see you again. Nice to see you.
It's been a bit, but
Yeah. Welcome back. COVID's over, so we can hang out a little bit, see each other.
Sure. Yeah. So we just wanted to talk to different members and missionaries, part of the community. As Christians, we have some questions about, especially about like foundational narratives, especially about prophets that we both would say we share, right? Like especially Old Testament figures. And thought we'd talk to some people who are knowledgeable who could give some answers. Not to say that you have to have all the answers.
I also have questions, so you know.
Sure, yeah. So insofar as you can answer it, it'd be great. We'll be talking to others as well. And maybe if we have time, we can hear more about your story too.
Yeah.
Okay. So, what should we start with, Alex? What should we ask?
Let's talk about Ishmael and Abraham.
Okay. Yeah. So just to begin with,
that's actually like an interesting story because I was a Christian before, and then I became a Muslim. And one of the things that I noticed right away was the different names that in this event. That when I was a Christian, it was Abraham and Isaac at the altar. And then when I became a Muslim, they were saying that it's Abraham and Ishmael.
Yeah.
And at that time when I was a Christian, I actually never thought of Ishmael at all. Right. It was like completely out of my narrative.
Yeah.
And then when I became Muslim, I was like, hey guys, Isaac is completely out of your narrative.
Right.
So I found one place that said that the family that has spoken about Isaac is there, but not Ishmael. So that's the point of mentioning some places or things that Ishmael did in the Quran. And then in terms of the different person to sacrifice, we don't say that your book is supposed to be Ishmael. Your book says Isaac was the guy.
Okay.
And some people will say that, well, you have it like this, his oldest or his only son or first son, so Ishmael was older. But it's whatever the people who have that book in their possession say that guy is.
Okay.
So like if your book says Abraham went with his oldest son, and then through some way we see that, he had a wife and he has a son here, but then he has a wife and he has a son here. It's whoever you guys tell us is this verse saying is his son.
Is that because, would you say this represented the Ahmadiyya position?
No, we don't say anything. Like when we have to use your book to talk about your religion, we're just grabbing at what you give us. You give us your book and we're like this. And then a little bit what we'll do is we'll take what you guys say. So I like what this rabbi say and I like what Greg say. And then we'll take those commentaries of these verses and try to ask you or explain things to someone who thinks differently.
Sure.
But in general, we have to say that we don't have authority to interpret or comment or to change your doctrine by using your book against you.
Okay.
So that's why I say, like, when we have a conversation about Jesus dying on the cross, we're going to say that, according to these verses, he didn't die. And then you're saying, well, according to all these other verses, he had to die for sin.
Sure. So let's put Jesus aside first for a minute.
So when it comes to Abraham, the reason we're saying that it was Ishmael is because we believe that he came here according to our history. But then your book might have something different. So
let's talk a little bit about the history. Because I feel like you right away went to the Isaac Ishmael thing and the sacrifice, which is, I think, where Christians and Muslims always immediately go to. Actually, that's not what I had in mind. So that is like later part of it, but I want to go back just to kind of first confirm my understanding, if it's accurate to say, what is the Islamic understanding? I don't know if there's a difference in Ahmadiyya versus Sunni on this, but the narrative of Abraham and Ishmael traveling down the Mecca and bringing him, there's hadith and like in Bukhari that says that he traveled with Hagar and Ishmael when he was a suckling infant and brought them down to the valley of Mecca before there was any civilization, right? And then
left them there.
And God, the teaching is that God took care of them and sent an angel, opened the Zamzam well, and then also the tribe of Jurhum came, right? And Ismail was raised in that tribe, and at the age of puberty, married one of the women out of the tribe. And later on, Abraham returned and built the Kaaba with him. Is that narrative?
Tribes. We can say all that.
Okay.
There will be a lot of like fluff that people would add to it through with imagination, but all the stuff that you said is those basics are correct.
That's essential stuff.
One of, like when I say nuances are like fluff, when he dropped them off there, the Kaaba was kind of in rubbles. There was ruins. This is a place Bedouins stop. It wouldn't have been like barren. It would have looked like people occasionally be here, start fires, have rocks, have places.
Right.
And there might have been passerby or Bedouins, but it was not a city. It was not a town. Like that,
And so that's good you mentioned the rubble, because that, would you say, I've read different like narrations or traditions in different Islamic sources. So I'm curious, like from an Ahmadiyya perspective, if there was already something there, buried or whatever.
Yeah.
So is it belief of Ahmadis that Abraham and Ishmael rebuilt?
That's correct.
Okay. And then would you know, is there a view who originally built it?
We believe the Prophet Adam.
Adam.
Yeah, he built it.
And my understanding, Adam is not the first human being, right?
That's correct.
Ahmadiyya, right. But the first prophet.
That's right. In this, like you could say, package or like succession of 6,000 year period.
Okay.
Because in some of the literature that Mirza Ghulam Ahmad mentions is these periods of 6,000 to 7,000 years. So at the first prophet at the beginning of this cycle is Adam, and then he says that Muhammad is at the end of that last cycle. So he says in that terms of that cycle.
You want to ask?
Yeah. Question about circumcision of Ishmael.
Oh yeah. So we also practice that. Muhammad, peace be upon him, he mentioned that practice. Unfortunately, I'm not exactly too sure on if Abraham ever said do this and then a bunch of other like reasons. But we do feel that it's some good thing, like what I was mentioning in my presentation. If there's some culture that has it, like say we don't do that, and then there's a culture that does it, and they say there's benefit in doing it, we have the choice to do it. But people who won't do it because their own religious convictions, like for instance, if a Muslim says, "Oh, I don't want to do that because the doctor is not sanitary, the hospital is not sanitary," I don't want to.
The question is if Ishmael was circumcised.
We won't have that in Qur'an. And we don't have
is it not in Hadith or
no? And like a lot of the stuff in Hadith, if it's going to be from the Jews, so I understand that you guys would quote our sources, but they're getting all their information from the Jews at the time. Like everything we know about the Jews in our Hadith is from Jews at the time, right?
In the time.
Yeah, like so sometimes they would tell him incorrect things. Like they would tell him, that we can eat this, and then he tells his people to eat it.
Why do you think they would do that?
Just malicious people. I don't want to say the whole community, but definitely.
But we're talking in that time. We're talking historical time.
Just the purpose of throwing people off. They were so fixed into their own departments. Like the pagans were not mingling with the Jews. The Muslims were not mingling with those at first. The idol worshippers. It was
definitely like it's a rabbinical practice not to mix with Gentiles.
Okay. Then maybe that's where it's come from. That they're not.
But I'm wondering, why would they misrepresent what they believe? Do you think it could be that
same reason they do that to you? Why do they tell you that there's no Messiah in the Old Testament? Why do they tell you that God never had Trinity?
Well, okay.
Like when I see you guys talk to Jews, I see this what you're saying clear as day.
I don't actually think that they're misrepresenting that. It's that they don't believe it because they follow their own sources outside the Tanakh, the Old Testament. Okay?
That don't support those.
That teach against those things. Okay.
Oh, so why do they teach against it though? Like that would be.
So, we could talk about that. Absolutely.
See, I said I have some questions too.
No, it's a great question, but
But now I see what you mean. That
I'm coming back to what you were saying about. We're good. Okay. When you were saying at that time, they may have misrepresented.
There's a verse in the Quran that says sometimes when the Holy Prophet would say something to the people, and it was something similar to what they understand, like the dietary rule or some religious practice, they would tell the Muslims some skewed version of it. So the Quran tells us that when we say, we said this word, they would say this word.
Oh, they'd mispronounce it. That's right. I remember that.
Let's go back to the question.
About this.
So do you think Ishmael was circumcised before he was to build the Kaaba, or before he was brought as a sacrifice himself?
I know that Abraham didn't get done it as a child, and so he did it in his older age. So one of the things our community leaders had said when somebody asked who converted to Ahmadiyya or convert to Islam, that if I convert to Islam, do I have to get circumcised? And the rebuttal was Abraham circumcised when he was a man. So, but in terms of the historical evidence if Ishmael did. I'm not really sure. If you guys have that, did he do Isaac and Ishmael at the same time, or like when did the circumcision take place for Isaac?
So he's circumcised before before Isaac is born. Ishmael is circumcised
because he was like 9
at the same time that Abraham is circumcised.
Genesis.
Right?
Isaac and Ishmael.
No, Ishmael is circumcised on the same day that Abraham is.
In your book,
in Genesis, in the Torah.
Okay.
Right. And
where are they?
Genesis 17.
No. Sorry. Where, like in Egypt or in?
Oh, that's a really good question. So it's in Canaan.
Okay, Canaan. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So
and it was all his household of Abraham.
So all the males, so not just Ishmael and so Abraham. Everybody's, and he had many servants.
I wouldn't have thought that actually. I thought it was like Abraham is like maybe his sons, but even just one son or both sons. I never thought actually this whole house and everybody.
Right.
That's how it has.
And
to start.
Was also before Isaac was even born. Okay. So it was a year later that Isaac was born.
Okay.
Okay, and then he was circumcised because the covenant was established. The timing of circumcision was supposed to be on the 8th day of after birth. Okay, but obviously when it's established first, everybody who's entering the covenant comes whenever they, like you were saying, right? So, and so when Isaac is born a year later, then he's basically the first one following the timing that was established, 8 day.
Is Isaac.
Right, Isaac.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
So that was question was like basically as a Muslim community, Ahmadiyya Muslim community, you believe that Ishmael was circumcised?
I think that they don't put the stress on him, but on the Prophet Abraham being circumcised, and that's why they all will do. I think if you asked everybody here, is Ishmael? Without any reading, without any evidence, they'll say yeah. They'll just think it makes.
Nobody knows.
It's interesting because when we've tried to find things in sources on circumcision, we haven't found anything on Ishmael, but we have found some things about Abraham.
Yeah.
And I think it's both in Bukhari, maybe I'm not sure if it's another one.
Yes, 80 plus years.
81. One says he was 80 and he did it with an axe, and then another one, okay,
that's big.
And
like maybe
it's a small axe.
Okay. Yeah. I guess my imagination is like. Oh my god.
So I think it's called an ads or something like that. Anyway, and then another somewhere says 120 years old.
Oh wow.
Right.
I don't find much in our literature about like when did the Muslims start doing the circumcision then?
So I think the idea, like you're saying, is it's inheriting from Abraham because and presumably through Ishmael. So
that they're doing that. But but the way I feel history works sometimes is how do you trust that they're saying it was an uninterrupted practice? What if you guys came over and influenced and then they started the practice again? Like what if there was like sometimes the way the Middle Eastern history is written, it seems sometimes plagiarized or sometimes it seems like they're just adopting something. So if you told me that the Muslims, as I didn't know that they were practicing that, if you said they were, I would say it was the influence of the Jewish community of that area. But then if they say, no, we've been doing it for thousands of years since the time, I'd be like, I don't know.
Well, okay, according to Islamic sources, right, aside from that issue, in general, there was the claim is that there's Abrahamic roots through Ishmael in Mecca, but eventually they're deviated, right? And then you have lots of paganism, idolatry, etc. So are they going to uphold necessarily that practice? Not necessarily, right? So maybe it was reintroduced even by the Jews.
That'd be like a happy medium, I would say,
Yeah, so I don't think that's a clear issue. But yeah, no, it's interesting when we're looking at the narratives, there are significant differences.
Here's one thing that I'm struggling with. I know that we have to do this on tape, but it's one of my questions. I just recently heard some of the rabbis saying that when we talk about Noah and Adam, these are legendary characters. These aren't real living.
Rabbis said that?
Yeah. And I said, I think the rest of us believe they were living people.
Absolutely.
And he said, no, they're figures that we use in our legends in order
Was it like a reform rabbi? Like a liberal
I didn't
one?
pay enough attention, but I will, because I was...
Did he look like he was Orthodox maybe?
Yeah, they look real
well, they have lots of different opinions. And
so
I would say...
Have they ever said to you, like, to us,
look, there are people who say that they're Christian theologians and stuff, and they'll take, I would say liberal, or I would also say unbiblical positions. They try to reinterpret things according to what they believe is the right thing they think, according to science. which I don't accept. Like, so I know even between our communities, I don't accept evolution, macroevolution, and common ancestry. So whether that's necessary in your community, I don't know. But definitely, there are Christians who try to reinterpret texts that I would say cannot fit with that.
Yeah.
So they would do the same thing for Noah.
Oh,
okay. Certainly, if you have a global flood is not consistent with having evidence in the sedimentary layers for long ages. It either was laid down rapidly or very gradually, not both. Okay. So typically, if people are accepting very long ages to fit with, a very long view in terms of evolutionary origins, you can't have a global flood. Otherwise, it would have decimated all the sedimentary layers that are there that are presumably there for millions and millions of years.
Still there.
Right. So that also, so typically you have to be consistent, you have to have a local flood, not a global flood interpretation of Noah to fit with very long ages. So
is there room for that when like a Christian is interpreting the flood to say local?
Well, people make arguments. People argue and debate about any issue, right? It doesn't make it legitimate, the position. But I would say it's not.
But the original position is global, and then the new one is local. And the local, that you could see the reason they're saying it because they're put in a corner.
I would argue it's motivated by that. Okay. Yeah.
But then
they're going to say it's not, but that.
But the way how some of these scientists or some of the evolutionists, how clever they are with things, it does seem like they can say something so confidently and then 20 years later say confidently, we were wrong. And that's okay to accept. As a population, we have to be more skeptical on the people who have been kind of making things up and going back and forth.
So
then something's been saying the same thing.
And we could have a whole conversation about that topic. But maybe we can, if we can.
Sorry, back there.
Yeah. Maybe we can come back to anything else about Abraham or Ishmael.
If I could, one thing about the stories. Because I've read the stories of the Bible and the stories of the Quran, I had also noticed that it wasn't the Quran's objective to tell the whole story of an event. But what I think some of us are guilty of doing is only accepting only the details that we have in our book of those people.
Sure.
So we have to actually see what other things are mentioned about these people from what you guys have.
Right.
But when you hear some Muslims say like, oh, it's corrupted and it's all this stuff, then they're depriving themselves of those details.
Sure.
Like, why say the whole thing is not beneficial when you have things that are similar that you're missing? Like some stuff that you were saying, I remember that. Yeah, we don't have that. And the only reason I know what you're saying is because I have both.
Yes.
I think that Muslims need more of a collective image, and if that helps us get closer to truth. Because life is long. I've just started this journey as a Muslim, and life is long. We don't know how the journey ends. But if I just stop, if I only read the Quran, if I only limit myself to these pages, I will not know what the other people have. And maybe that information might bring me to another place.
Well, and I would say probably we would agree. I know that you've got a very interesting journey in your faith. I know like JW background, and then also you were Sunni, I think, before Ahmadiyya.
Yeah.
So, but
so I'm trucking along through these.
Yeah. But I didn't grow up as a Christian. I grew up in more New Age influence. But I like to study about other religions, read other scriptures because I care about truth. Yeah. I don't want to believe what I believe because a tradition or people told me or it makes me feel good. I want to know if it's factually accurate and true. Yeah. So I'm assuming it's the same for you. Yeah.
We can't use our stubbornness or ego to keep us where we are.
Yeah. So it's important, like you're saying, we have to be open to explore and study and examine and scrutinize other texts. Otherwise, we won't know really.
And to write off, as a Muslim, to write off the whole Bible as some fabricated or untrustworthy thing, there's so much evidence to support, in my opinion, enough reliability to read it. But the way some people will blackball the whole book, I say that no, you have deprived yourself from some light, because there's a lot of light that can be found in the Bible, and maybe there's more light that I will find over time. But since I know it's there, I always tell my Muslim brothers, you have to read that book too, because it will inspire you and it will teach you things. But if you have this strong hardened opinion that it's all light, the Quran hasn't deemed the entire book sealed like that. I think it's the Muslims' attitude to go take that verse a little extreme.
Do you have a sense of it all in your own thought, especially given your own history? Do you have a sense, from your perspective, without getting into a debate about interpretation, just your view, on the Quranic view of, let's say, focus on Torah, since we're talking about Abraham and Ishmael. What would you say, if you can, is there anything that it would specify that was changed or corrupted?
Yeah, no, that's what I mean. It's like, it will say that they did this or they did that, but then it won't say they have this, it's supposed to be this. But the story, we end up, when we read both, we find out that the story has some difference. So that's when we'll say, maybe that's the difference.
Right.
Like, one thing is that Adam's wife in the Quran is not mentioned. Right? The name
Eve is mentioned.
Not mentioned.
Not in the Quran.
Not in the Quran.
Yeah.
So let's say
Pennywise, actually. Lot's wife. Noah's
not
wife.
Benjamin.
Because only the only female woman's name is Mary in the Quran.
Right.
So the only woman mentioned by name is Mary, and she's the only female name, and she's the mother of Jesus. And there's a chapter named after her, chapter 19, and then her whole family is chapter 3. But going back to the thing, I just find that that's what causes that attitude, is when they see that, oh, it wasn't Isaac, it's Ishmael. Okay, I can't trust anything anymore. Right. No, just leave that one little detail aside, and then keep learning, keep reading, because it's not telling us the whole thing. It seems like the Quran tells us a story for correcting maybe something, but not to say the whole narrative.
So my perception in studying what I have so far of the Quran is, when I look at its teaching about previous scriptures, in particular Torah, I don't really see that it's really teaching that it was corrupted textually.
Yeah.
Right?
Because it seems like, say, I told them to do this.
Like they corrupt the teachings about it, I would say. Like maybe the rabbis, the people in the time.
And that's what the Quran specifies, is that the guys in charge were shifty and corrupt. And so we send people an authority.
And like concealing what's in it.
Yeah, concealing.
Right? That implies that what's in it is not necessarily bad.
Right.
Right.
Because you would agree then, because you were saying about the Jews, about what they're saying about the Jesus, they are concealing some of the stuff about him that is true.
Yeah, but they're not changing it.
Yeah.
So, like,
they're just,
for example, we would say, like, Isaiah 53 is like, you probably know that passage.
Yeah, I heard what they say, that they're like...
They say it's the nation, not the Messiah, right? Like, it's obviously an individual, it's not the nation. So...
And the way they're trying to be shifty with words, and that's where they're
right, so, but the text is not changing. In fact, we have that text in the Dead Sea Scrolls, predating even the time of Jesus, and the whole thing is there.
Yeah.
And so it's not like the Christians tampered; they didn't somehow find it in the Qumran's caves. That's right.
I've seen, this is where you put them up there, because I do feel like there was some jealousy on the type of the Jews for the Christian as the movement started to take off, and that they would have started putting down the converts or trying to pull them away. And I think that is what we're saying, that the Jews were crafty in trying to confuse people and trying to shift things around. Even a practice like, maybe in the time of Jesus, a person converts from the Gentile, or like becomes a Jew, and the Jew will say, oh yeah, we do this thing. And then he does it, but he's not doing what they do.
Okay, I need to ask a follow-up question.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
Safe by the bell.
Members, guests, hosts, volunteers, everyone.